this video I'll be painting a Black Templars Crusader from Warhammer 40k. Here's a list of the paints you'll need for this model. The first step is to do all the base coats, so the first colour I'm using is matte black to go over all of the matte black primer that I've already done. This is just to fill in any areas that the black primer has missed and to give it a consistent finish at the end. For this I'm using the regiment brush and applying one thin coat all over. Now we've made sure that there's no plastic showing through all the black, and we've got a brushed on finish in case we need to make any touch-ups to the black later on. The next colour I'm going to use is Dusty Skull, and I'll be using this for the main cloth area. I'm thinning this with just a little bit of water so that it applies nice and smooth, and using the regiment brush again and just applying this to his cloth. Try not to get any cream on the black armour, but it's not the end of the world because we can just touch it up before we move on to the washes stage, but it doesn't matter if you get it anywhere else because we're going to be painting over that anyway. Now I'm going in with leather brown over the belt. For this one I'm using the Insane Detail brush for a bit of extra accuracy, and thin this paint very slightly so you still have control of it. Next I'm using Basilisk Red for the tassel and for the sword handle. Because this is such a small area I'm covering, I'm not thinning it at all so that it doesn't spill over. Now I'm using Brigade Grey over the central part of the shoulder pads. I'm using the regiment brush again for this colour as it's covering quite a large area. And I'm applying this to all of the middle part of the shoulder pad. Don't worry about getting it on the shoulder trim or the cross because we can paint over this with black before we move on. I've thinned this colour quite a bit for smooth coverage, so it will need a couple coats. And now I'm just going back over the trim and the symbol with the matte black. That's the shoulder pads base coated and the trim of the symbol cleaned up. And the last base coat I'm going to use is pure red on the lenses and the weapon casing. I'm going to start with the weapon casing. For that I'm using the regiment brush and I've thinned the red with a few drops of water. And then for the lenses I'm doing the same but with less water added to the paint and using the Insane Detail brush. And then I'm doing the same again to add another coat until we can't see any black through it. So that's all the base coats finished. Before we move on to the next step, just make sure you go back in on all of the armour areas and all of the areas that are going to be metallic and cover them back in matte black. And then we can move on to the washes stage. First I'm going to use Bony Matter over the cloth. I'm adding a few drops of this to my palette and then I'm mixing it with some Speed Paint Medium. This dilutes the colour slightly so you can still see some of the cream through it, and it allows a smoother coverage with less patchiness. After giving it a good mix, I'm going to apply it to the cream cloth using the regiment brush. I used a 1-to-1 mix of Speed Paint and Speed Paint Medium. To tidy up any pooling, use a clean brush and hold it in the pooled area before it dries to soak up the excess paint. Try not to touch it while it dries because this will cause patchiness. Now I'm going to use hardened leather over the belt. I've applied an equal amount of Speed Paint Medium to this one as well. For the weapon casing and the lenses, I'm going to be mixing Slaughter Red with a few drops of Black Tone. For the mixture, I'm adding 2 drops of Slaughter Red with 2 drops of Black Tone, and then also 2 drops of Speed Paint Medium. Once it's thoroughly mixed, I'm using the regiment brush to apply it to the weapon casing. I'm not worried about getting it on the black on the weapons because I'm going to be painting over this later in silver. Using the Insane Detail brush, I'm going to apply the same mix to the lenses. Lastly, I'll be using Black Tone on its own over the dark red tassel, and I'm going to go back over the belt for a bit more depth. I'm not adding any Speed Paint Medium to this one, and I'm applying it with the Insane Detail brush. Now that all the washes are done, we can move on to the layers. For this model, I'm only going to be layering up the cloth, so I'm going back in with Dusty Skull. For this step, I'm adding quite a bit of water because I'm aiming for just light coverage over the most raised areas. So that's all the front of the cloth done, and I'm not going to worry about the back because it's in between his legs and it'd be in shade anyway, so it doesn't need a layer. I'm going to start with the lenses. The first colour I'm going to use is Lava Orange. For this I'm using the Insane Detail brush and I'm thinning the paint very slightly with water. Make sure you get your brush into a very fine tip and then apply it to the bottom edge of the lens. Next up I'm going to be using Fiendish Yellow. Again, I'm thinning this one very slightly with water. If you don't thin it at all, it normally dries before you get it to the model, but if you thin it too much, it's going to flow into the whole lens. Don't worry if you get any on the black, because we can fix this up afterwards. and that's why I prefer to do the lenses first. For this colour, I'm focusing on the bottom edge of the lens, but in the inner corners. Next, I'm going to be working on the armour, and the first colour I'm going to use is Night Sky. I'm thinning this one with a bit more water than the last colours, just so it flows better along the edges. Again, I'm using the Insane Detail brush and aiming to cover around 80% of the edges of the model. Wherever I can, I'm trying to hold the brush at a 45-degree angle to the edge I'm trying to paint, and apply very little pressure so you get fine lines. That's the first blue highlight done on the armour, focusing on the more prominent areas to save time. And the second edge highlight on the armour, I'll be using Wolf Grey. With this one, I'm adding just a small amount of water so that it's easier to control, and I'm adding it in the same areas as I applied the darker blue edge highlight, but covering a lot smaller of an area, and only focusing on the upper areas that would catch the light the most. For all of the armour joints, I'm going to be using Uniform Grey. I'm adding a very small amount of water to this one as well, and applying it to the armour joints, just on the raised edges. Now I'm using Paratrooper Tan to highlight the belt. We're looking for the same consistency as the previous colours for this one, and just applying it to the top edges of the belt. To highlight the cloth, I'll be using Ancient Stone. The same consistency again to add Ancient Stone to the most raised edges of the cloth. Again, for the cloth, I haven't added a highlight to the back because it can't be seen. To highlight the tassel and the handle on the sword, I'll be mixing the Basilisk Grey base coat with Ancient Stone. Since both these colours are already on my palette, I've just added a small paintbrush full of Ancient Stone into the Basilisk Red from earlier to make a kind of pale pink colour. If you'd prefer not to mix colours, you can use something like Elderflower from this range instead. And then finally, I'll be using matte white to highlight the shoulder pads and to do the dots in the lenses. Still using the Insane Detail brush, I'm adding a very small amount of water again to the matte white, and applying this just to the upper curved edge of the shoulder pad. And then bring your brush into a fine point and add a dot highlight to the outer top edge of the lens. I'll also be using pure reds to highlight the edges of the weapons. And then finally, because I forgot earlier when I was highlighting the rest of the armour, we need to do the night sky on the shoulder symbols. And then just like the armour, I'm going back in with Wolf Grey to highlight the very tops. Now that all the matte colours are complete, I've given it a quick matte varnish and I can move on to the metallics. For this, I'll be using gunmetal. I thinned it slightly with water and I'm going to apply it to everywhere that would be metallic. The rest of the weapons and the chains, the Aquila and the helmet details. Next, to wash the silver, I'm using black tone and I'm applying this undiluted to all of the silver areas. Now that the metallic is shaded, we can go in with the highlight, and for this I'm using Mithril. I haven't thinned this one down and I'm applying it to all of the raised areas of the metallic. And there you have a finished Black Templar model which you can base however you want. The Army Painter have a wide range of basing materials that are good for this. If you'd like to learn how to play Black Templars, check out our How to Play course that's in the description below. Also in the description you'll find a PDF version of this guide. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.